Welcome back to the Dethroning Your Inner Critic YouTube channel. This is the space where we peel back the layers of automatic internal conditioning and self-doubt and never enoughness to remember who you really are beneath the voice in your head that says you're not ready, you're not worthy, or you're not doing it right. So I'm Joanna Kleinman, psychotherapist, CEO of the Dethroning Your Inner Critic coaching and consulting company, and creator of the Mind Method. And today, I want to speak to you about the part of you that knows that you're meant for more. Okay, now you might already be starting to see the vision, to see yourself. Maybe you're leading powerful programs impacting lives. Maybe you're starting that business or writing that book or changing your career or getting into the best shape of your life or finally living in alignment with your purpose. Now, when you are fantasizing about those things, that's your authentic self. So that future version of you feels expansive. It feels exciting. It lights you up from the inside. And there's a deep inner yes when you imagine yourself being that. But then something happens, and I am very familiar with that thing that happens. Your brain, which is wired to really protect your old identity, kicks in. And that identity was shaped by your inner critic. So your inner critic does not care how excited you are. Your inner critic is not impressed by your vision because your inner critic's only concern is to keep you safe, which usually means keeping you right where you are in something that feels predictable and something that feels like you know where it's going. Now, there's the conflict because your soul is saying, this is who I'm becoming. But your nervous system and your automatic mind are saying, nope, nope, that's way too risky. You cannot step into this complete unknown. Now, here's the truth. Your current identity is always going to win over your vision. Unless you intentionally unhook from that current identity and align with a future version of yourself and live from that self right now. Now, that means living from that nervous system right now that's aligned with that future self. In other words, a nervous system that's calm, a nervous system that's secure, a nervous system that can step into the complete unknown and trust that you can handle what's ever coming. And you don't need to protect yourself from judgment or failure or criticism or feeling like you're not enough. So if you've ever started something towards your vision and then you've not followed through, it's not because you weren't committed. It's because your actions were still aligning with that old self, not the future self that you're trying to become. Now, this is why identity level inner work is really a non-negotiable because you can't create a new life from the same nervous system, the same thoughts, the same beliefs, the same emotions, the same energy that built your current life. You have to embody a new identity from the inside out. Because the moment that your identity shifts into that future self, your reality has to follow. Now, that's exactly what has changed everything for me is aligning my nervous system with the future version of me and living from that self and that nervous system right now. So I stopped taking action from the version of me who doubted herself and the version of me who was always wondering, is this really going to happen? And when's the next shoe going to drop? And what if I fail? And what if it never goes where I want it to go? And instead, I started taking action from the version of me who knows what's meant for me will find me. And so this is the version of me now that's already living the life that I'm called into, not because everything has manifested in concrete reality, but because I know that life is magical. And as long as I am grounded in a nervous system that is calm and can handle anything that comes, and a nervous system that doesn't assign meaning when something doesn't go my way, that makes me feel like I'm not good enough, really a nervous system that can just flow with life, flow through the journey of building what is really meant for me, which is to impact the planet. So if you're hearing the call, but you're also hearing the resistance, I want you to know this. You're not broken. You're just standing at the edge of your old identity and you keep merging with that old identity. You keep getting sucked back into what it says and all of its fears and how it makes you feel. So the question is, which part of you are you going to allow to make the decisions in your life? So is it the old self that, remember, that's the part of you that's going to keep you safe in the familiar? Or are you going to start stepping into the part that is already living the life that your soul is longing for? Now, here's what you need to remember. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just need to start acting right now from who you're becoming. Now, I want to talk about self-sabotage. So, self-sabotage is not failure. Self-sabotage is that old survival energy. Remember, your old self basically lives in your survival mechanism brain, fight, flight, freeze. So that old energy is tethered to your inner critic. Now, when you stretch beyond your old identity, your inner critic panics because, as I said, the unfamiliar feels really unsafe. So if you look closely, those patterns of thoughts and beliefs and nervous system reactivity and emotions probably began a long time ago with something really tender. Like you were a young child who needed comfort, or maybe you were a teenager who needed to belong, or maybe you were an adult who felt like you didn't know where you were going, right? So self-sabotage becomes a stand-in for what you didn't get. It could be, I need to feel wanted and needed and valued and validated. That's a stand-in for love. It could be, I need to make sure that no one's ever upset with me and I'm never disappointing anybody, right? And that could be a stand-in for a lack of connection. So unless you learn to unhook yourself from that conditioned pain, you'll keep looping back into the same beliefs, the same emotions, and the same behaviors. Because your authentic self is saying, I want this, but your inner critic is saying, that's not for someone like me. And suddenly you're back in that old identity again. So that inner conflict might sound like I'm not smart enough, or this is probably not going to work for me, or I'm just somebody who tends to start things and not finish, right? Or I'm just not built to tolerate all of this stress and anxiety, right? That's just who I am. That's not who you are. That's who your inner critic is. right? So, as much as you want the freedom, the truth is there's no freedom from this conflict because within yourself, you've really got two parts to you. You've got your old conditioned inner critic self and you've got your authentic self. So, the key is not to try and get rid of that inner critic self. Just observe that inner critic self without judgment. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to argue with it. Just notice the familiar doubts, the familiar fears, the familiar longing for wanting the validation and the acceptance and the approval and not wanting to upset anybody or not wanting to sound aggressive or like a bitch. See, most people miss this step because they're so entangled in their inner critic self that it just feels like them. But see, when you are separate from it, when you can observe it, you now have the power to create the space to choose differently. So you can't want the wealth and keep thinking from a broke mind. You can't want the love and keep acting from a lonely mind. You can't want the confidence and have a mind that's always focusing on your doubts. So the people who change their lives aren't hoping and wishing. They're really embodying the end state inside their nervous system. They're acting as if their desires are already fulfilled and their nervous system reflects that. And that is an ongoing practice. My inner critic self is always trying to suck me back in. Okay. So it's not about wanting harder or pushing yourself or striving for what's next. It's about already being the person who already has what you want now because you already know it's on its way. And you don't have to know when, and you don't have to know how and who and in what form it's going to take. Now, the paradox is you can't force yourself into that reality. You'll get exhausted. And the exhaustion and control will only keep you chasing more of what you don't have. And then you're in a nervous system reactivity where you're wanting what you don't have. That's a nervous system that's aligned with lack and distrust. So take aligned action without losing your peace. And that's when you begin to say, well, it would be nice if this happened, but you know what? If it doesn't happen, it's not a big deal because whatever is meant for me can't miss me. I know that. So I will just keep taking actions and I will trust that if it doesn't happen, it's no big deal. So I want you to feel the relief in your body when you say that. It's no big deal because whatever is meant for me can't miss me. Notice how the pressure in your body drops. Notice how you can move through your day as if your desire is already handled by the universe. Of course, you have to take inspired action when it feels natural, right? But you don't have to keep pushing because this signals to your nervous system that you're ready for the good outcome without the attachment. This signals to your nervous system that you're safe, that you're calm, that you can enjoy your life now, that you don't have to keep waiting and bracing for the next shoe to drop. So when the obstacles appear, you don't fight them. You just imagine yourself stepping into a life where everything flows. And then you don't look at things that show up as obstacles. You can actually trust that that's not an obstacle. That's just not meant for you. You act as if the right opportunities are already arranged for you. And so the rejection, if it comes, you keep trusting that life is still working out for you. Now, here's why so many people burn out. Burnout does not come from doing too much. It comes from living by your inner critic's values instead of the values of your authentic self. So your inner critic's values are rooted in fear and control. So those values sound like keep going no matter what, and say yes all the time so you don't let anybody down, and do it perfectly or don't do it at all, and work hard because rest is lazy. So when you live by those rules, of course your nervous system is in fight, flight, freeze. And you know what? You might even look really successful on the outside. You might be making the money, you might be making the deals, you might have a thriving business, but inside you feel disconnected and anxious and resentful and exhausted. And maybe there are other parts of your life that are not going well, like perhaps your relationships or your sense of yourself or your joy in your life or your physical or emotional well being. Now, that's because the life your inner critic built is out of alignment with the life your authentic self desires. Your authentic self values peace and purpose and connection and self love and authenticity and self compassion and rest. So when you begin to choose those values, saying no when your inner critic is screaming yes, resting when your inner critic calls it laziness, that's when your burnout begins to heal. Not because you stopped doing, but because you finally started doing what feels aligned. Now, sometimes alignment can feel impossible. You might be in a position where maybe you're a caregiver. Maybe you have real responsibilities where you can't leave your job right now that's out of alignment. And if that's where you are, first of all, my heart goes out to you. And I want you to understand that you're not doing it wrong. Okay. Even in that chapter of your life, you can stay connected to your authentic self in small, quiet ways. And you can still trust that there will be a chapter where you will be able to live more in alignment. So find those small alignments right now. Find those moments that you can just do something that you love, that you can just go outside and let the sun shine on your face and just breathe. Because even in those small aligned moments, those small steps begin to rewire your path forward. And that's the path of awakening. Now, here's what I wish I knew sooner. I kept my eye on the vision, but I didn't know how important it was to regulate my nervous system. So when the good things happened, I was still bracing for the next shoe to drop. So awakening can sometimes begin with grief or rage. That's the death of your old identity. Because if you never face that shadow side of yourself, the life your inner critic built, you'll keep running from the core pain that your inner critic has been protecting you from for your whole life. You'll keep running away from that fear that you're not enough, that you're not loved enough, that you're not valued enough, that you're not good enough. And as long as you're running, you can't get to the other side of the darkness. And the other side of the darkness, that's where the light is. Your thoughts are not the whole picture. Yes, your thoughts in part create your reality. But if your body is still wired for survival, no positive thought is going to override the energy of your nervous system that you're emitting. So that alignment doesn't always feel easy at first. In fact, it can feel pretty crappy because it often feels terrifying because you are being stretched beyond the only identity that you've ever known. So I want you to remember this. Your external world is always mirroring your internal world. Now, that also includes generational pain that's been handed to you from your parents and your parents' parents. We all live in these collective survival patterns, and we live in a culture that makes it hard to rest and hard to trust. So sometimes awakening doesn't feel good, but that doesn't mean you're on the wrong path. Now, your brain is never going to obey what you wish. Your brain is going to obey your identity. So until you rehearse the micro thoughts and beliefs and behaviors of your future self, you're going to keep recreating the same life. And I do not want that for you. Once you shift, once you embody that future identity now, life begins to open. Again, not because everything's perfect, but because you're finally living from your authentic self. And that's when you realize that your life is meant to be magical. So, thank you for tuning in today. If you found this video helpful, I would so appreciate if you would subscribe to the channel, share it with somebody who you feel needs to hear this. And if you are ready to rewire your nervous system now, and if you are ready to live from that future self now, so that you can feel the nervous system of someone who knows that everything that's meant for you is already on its way. The link to the Mastering Your Mind community is in the bio. Schedule some time with me and join this incredibly powerful community where we are all working together to rewire our nervous systems to usher in the next chapter of life that's meant for us. Thank you for tuning in today, and I'll see you in the next episode.